All right, YouTube, Trump has decided to grade himself, of course, on achievement, effort, and message and so forth. And I think he was pretty honest. So far, I wouldn't exactly give him an A for achievement, but I would give him like a high B or something like that. He's done better than any of the other presidents in recent history in their first month in office. He is at least making an attempt to fulfill every pledge that he's made. Some will fall through. Under even the best of circumstances, some of that won't happen. Obamacare will drag on for some time as far as either repealing it and replacing it, or reforming it, or doing away with it for something else. Doesn't really matter what the solution is. It'll take a while. It won't be perfect, and not all of his fans will support the end result. It's never going to happen. There are people that consider the concept of, a 10 cent per person subsidy to be some sort of communism, so he's got to deal with the fact that some people aren't going to like what happens. And the left is never going to support anything he does. He could take Obamacare, write something that is word for word the same thing, resubmit it as a replacement. They would still immediately come out against it without even reading it, without even knowing it was literally the same. He could come out and say, oh, we're going to be socialists now, and they'd call him a fascist for doing so, or call it a ruse or a lie or something like that. So he knows not to bother going after the Democratic partisans, but he also is well aware that they're a dying breed. So are Republican partisans, although he's bolstering support. He's re-solidifying the Republican movement. It's smaller than it used to be, but it appears to be more hardcore. Democrats are falling apart right now. They don't know how to respond to him. You looked at Nancy Pelosi last night. You can tell. They don't know. They don't know what they're going to do. They're a party that is currently without sane leadership, without ideological leadership. They can't even agree upon what ideology they want to use. Return to centrist Democrat stuff, continue with corporate neoliberalism, become progressives, become outright socialists. Should we focus on wedge issues? Should we form a more general platform? They don't know. They don't know how to combat Trump. They're going to lose. I can already see it coming. I don't even have to hold back now in predicting that that's what's probably going to happen during the midterms. Yeah, prediction. 90% chance that the Republicans carry the midterms at this point. Looking at Tom Perez and looking at their reactions last night and their attempt to rebuff what Trump said with their own little speaker there from Kentucky, oh man, you people are completely lost. As for his grading, though, that Trump gave himself, he, in a moment of astonishing clarity, I think even for those who don't like him, said, oh yeah, on message I've been behind. I'd give myself like a C or C plus on that. I agree with him. His messaging up until last night was lackluster, specifically because he hadn't yet given the speech. He hadn't yet solidified his fans around him, brought the rest of the party to heel into negotiation where he is going to end up getting most of his way. They'll get some of theirs. Ultimately, it'll be Trump carrying the day time and time again on most things he wants to do. He's called again to fill the Supreme Court seat that's vacant, which is important. The border wall and Obamacare are the three things most on people's minds right now. You may have noticed, Trump said within the first 30 days he'd have wiped ISIS off the face of the earth or something to that effect. It didn't happen, and nobody's even talking about it. People forgot about it. ISIS is already dying. He's going to quietly continue those strikes, some of which I don't agree with because we're still involved in a wider area than we need to be. But he will continue to quietly do that. Hopefully civilian casualties will be reduced under Trump as opposed to Obama, who seemed to enjoy bombing orphanages and hospitals. I don't think Trump is sadistic. You listen to his message again, he calls for peace. He said, oh yeah, we're tired of starting wars and things like that. This is a Republican. A Republican who supposedly is the next Adolf Hitler calls for peace and says, yeah, we want to work with everyone. We're kind of tired of the warmongering stuff. How surreal can you get? Best timeline, I suppose. On his effort, he gave himself an A+. I would agree with him. Especially when you compare it to like Obama or Bush or somebody like that who basically dragged their heels on everything. Obama gets into office, he's like, yeah, one of the first things I'm going to do is close Gitmo. And of course he leaves office, Gitmo is still open, and he never even made an attempt to do so. He finally, in a very belated fashion, made several attempts, like on Cuba and stuff, where he was successful, honestly. On U.S. energy, he was successful there, although not the way he had planned. I think he meant green energy. He ended up instead overseeing a massive oil and gas boom. But I guess he got that accomplished anyway. It took a while, but he did do that. He did step out of the way when he saw a good thing coming and began to completely ignore environmentalists, much like Hillary says many of them are actually Russian co-opted or something along those lines. Partially true, admittedly so, but the way she went about explaining it to like the Goldman Sachs people just alienated every Bernie Sanders fans on the face of the earth. It was mystical to watch the reaction. Like, what is she talking about? I thought she was a Democrat. Meanwhile, they're looking at Trump. They're like, I thought he was a Republican. Aren't Republicans really pro-war and jingoistic and they really want to bomb everybody? And meanwhile, here's Trump. First major, he doesn't even really, he says, yeah, ISIS are lawless savages and we're gonna stop them. But he doesn't openly call for invading some country for being host to ISIS or anything. He does hardline the Iranians, which is a perennial task that every Republican must fulfill for AIPAC. I happen to disagree with him, by the way, on his assessment of Iran. I don't think they're a threat to us. I also don't think they're a threat to Israel, which has hundreds of nuclear weapons. But I suppose that's a little bit of the theater that they have to perform for some of their donors. I suppose he's covering the ass of people like McCain more than his own. Of course, he didn't take their corporate cash. He self-funded mostly. It was mostly grassroots as well. McCain and Lindsey Graham, who should be thrown to the curb by the GOP, by the way. They're not so fortunate in their charisma and their own personal fortunes, I suppose. But as far as achievement, I would disagree with Trump. You have not gotten an A+ for achievement, or an A, or whatever you gave yourself. You still have a long ways to go, but here's the thing. You've set yourself up to get that A in the first 100 days even, maybe, because you've made more progress than any contemporary president has made towards many of their goals, especially their main campaign goals that early in office. There have been times in living memory where someone is elected and almost immediately forgets to even discuss what they've said. But Trump has already begun the process of deportations, has already convened people to talk about the eventual cost and form of the wall, has already stated that part of his comprehensive immigration reform will include residency, conditional residency for otherwise law-abiding individuals here illegally, which is good. I happen to support that. He's already proposed increased defense spending, which I have no problem with. Of course, it was significantly cut under Obama. My hope is that this is going to go further as well, because if he introduces, and this is true for pharmaceuticals and health insurance too, if he introduces the kind of competitive sort of qualities that he's discussed already in the private marketplace at large, and as well health insurance providers, if he extrapolates that to the U.S. military, it will drive costs down. So you don't really need to raise the budget much. You can actually use all that extra money to pay the troops more, do whatever you want to do, and it won't matter because your dollars will go further. If things are not competitive, they tend to cost a lot more. By injecting competition into the health marketplace, by healthcare marketplace rather, by injecting that competition, you drive prices down. It's just the way the things work. There's no competition in many parts of the country. There's one group that is singularly responsible, has a monopoly. Monopolies don't work. Also, the Democrats are always talking about how bad monopolies are. Oh, corporations, monopolies. These are corporate monopolies that you and Obama have constructed. You constructed those. They did not exist before. There were options for people, at least cheaper plans available. Trump is going to reintroduce that, reintroduce competition, and probably competitive sort of drug importation systems. That way they'll also have to compete with out-of-nation groups and fronts, which will drive prices down further. Our efficiency is higher than most of these competing marketplaces for drugs. So they have the ability to lower them, it's just they've had no reason to lower them. They've got a stranglehold on the United States. The pharmaceutical industry here experiences little competition. It's basically price fixing. It's essentially a form of trust. It's also blatantly illegal what they do in partnership with the old guard government. Trump wants to break it up. He's a Teddy Roosevelt on the issue. A progressive Democrat, so to speak. I know, Teddy Roosevelt was a Republican. That was back when they were the progressive movement. On that single issue, Trump is to the left of Bernie Sanders. And that's actually the one place that being a far leftist is probably a good thing. Break up the trust, break up the monopoly. You bring in real capitalism. It's based on competition. It's a good thing. So he set himself up to achieve that A plus for achievement, nonetheless. He has set himself up to do that, but he's not there yet. His effort, I'll grant that to him. And I honestly would give him higher marks, maybe, for his messaging. I'd say maybe a B minus or something, not just a C. Because as far as his core fans go, he's already been on message. As far as the independents go, especially as of last night, that shoots way up. I think he did very well with them. And he's not going to be able to craft any form of message that's going to resonate with the far left, with the Hitler-esque elements of the neoliberal movement that really want to sell our country down the river. He's never going to actually be able to form a message that's going to bode well for him with those groups. They've already gobbled up the Kool-Aid that they get from CNN and these similar groups that last night took a beating. They had to admit that his speech was at least okay. He's never going to be able to talk directly to them. They're already convinced that he's a fascist. There's basically nothing that he can do. That's a lost cause. His advantage is because independent voters are now such a massive block compared to what they were maybe 10 years ago, that if he does halfway well targeting them and does halfway well in general as a president, we don't suffer some sort of calamity while he's in office the next few years, he can expect to have massive support, and it'll be much stronger than those that have come before him. He's coming from behind now, expectations being low, thus when he does something like his great speech from last night, which I grade, I say it's a great speech because of his speaking skills and because of people's reaction to it, not because I agree with every element of it. I don't agree with him on Iran and some of these other things. When he does that, because expectations were low, it actually helps him a lot more than it would help any other maybe president about who more optimism is seen. So Trump is doing well. He's doing much better than Obama did early on. He's doing much better than W did. But then again, W is basically... if we were more like Rome, W statues would already have been like thrown in the river, so to speak, and he would have been scored out of all history books, and it'd be like he never existed at all, because people would generally want to forget that he did. Bill Clinton, Trump has exceeded him, basically, already. All he has to do is fulfill the things that he's already working on with a halfway decent quality of actually fixing the issues he's pledged to ameliorate or solve. And if he does that, he will be remembered as a good president, somewhere around Reagan ratings. And you may not see it now. All you see is the news saying, oh, his approval is so low and he's a fascist and he's crazy and stuff. People aren't going to see him that way in a couple years. In a couple years, people are going to see this as normal, as far as having a president who uses Twitter, occasionally insults somebody, but otherwise is fairly jovial, honestly, sane, and doing a good job. They're going to look back at Obama and say, what were we smoking when we thought he was a good president? They're going to compare them directly. It's going to be funny. Why do you think Obama says, oh yeah, I'm going to be more in the political arena right now? Why do you think he isn't just eating pineapples on the beach? He's trying to salvage himself right now. What little is left of his legacy, which essentially boils down to, oh yeah, Donald Trump became viable because of you, or at least the Democrats cast it off that way. He realizes if Trump does well and crafts his message well, and that Obama is probably the only Democrat right now that can actually stand in his way, honestly. There's nobody else who can, really. Sanders is fringe. Pelosi, nobody cares about Pelosi anymore. Cuomo and some of these others. Obama is the only real top gun that they have to actually go after Trump's policy, which means he's going to try to use the bully pulpit, and he's going to try to use it early and often while Trump is still less popular, so that he can hopefully gain an advantage. I don't think he'll succeed, but that's what he's trying to do. He may end up fucking his own legacy further, though, by trying to do this. That's the reason he's doing so. When Bush left, when all of a sudden a person with virtually no political experience became viable because W was seen as such a failure, did W come out and say, oh, well, we need to stop him because socialism or something? No, he shut up. He disappeared into the woodwork for several years. When he came back out, he was shaking Obama's hand, pretending he was his best buddy. He disappeared off into the night for a very long time. He did that because, of course, he didn't want to be seen in connection with him because Obama was more popular. He knew there was nothing that could be done. Obama thinks differently. Obama is egotistical enough to think, yeah, I can take Trump down. I don't think so. I don't think that it's going to work, but that's why he's sort of re-entering politics in a loose sense. So Trump's done well. Not as well maybe on achievement as he's grading himself, although his message isn't quite as bad, honestly, as he's saying he thinks that it is. I would say that that's at least halfway decent. Give him B minus for that. Give him definitely the A for effort, though. On that, I don't think you can really dispute. He's certainly trying. And he has no prior political experience either. You got to realize all these others we're comparing him to had already been in politics. They sort of knew the ropes. Many of them were already in an executive capacity. They kind of knew how these sorts of things operated. Trump, it's like a shot in the dark. And he's already gained a fairly good grasp, I think, of how to govern. That's about all. Peace out.